Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've made it to the end of a pretty eventful week. Even though I've only been here for the last 3 days, it seems like it's been a pretty busy one. But we've got a lot to talk about today. The latest polling on the New York City mayor's race. And yes, technically Andrew Cuomo is still running. So we're going to be talking about that. We'll also be talking about, turns out the media and a lot of Democrats lied about that ICE raid in California at the marijuana farm yesterday. I'm sure that'll shock a lot of people. But what will genuinely shock a lot of people, Jim, I don't know that we've ever said this on the Three Martini Lunch, so in some sense today is a historic day. John Kerry was right.
Greg, I'm having technical difficulties. It sounds like you just said John Kerry. Yeah, he finally catches up to the broken clock. Stay tuned for the next thing John Kerry says that is correct. Blind squirrel found an acorn. Well done, Mr. former senator.
Yeah, if you're waiting for his next time to be right, pack a lunch. But if you got it right, he got it right. And so this is with an interview with the National Pulse. And it says, former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has admitted that President Donald J. Trump was correct on border and immigration issues, stating, quote unquote, Trump was right during an interview. He criticized Democrats for failing to address border security adequately, admitting the U.S.-Mexico border was, quote, under siege during the Biden presidency. Kerry, the Democratic presidential nominee in 2004, remarked, "The first thing any president should say, or anybody in public life, is without a border protected, you don't have a nation." He added, "I wish President Biden had been heard more often saying, 'I'm going to enforce the law,'" unquote. So not only is he agreeing with Trump, he's basically quoting Trump saying, if you don't have a border, you don't have a nation. So what happened to John Kerry? I guess maybe it is just a blind squirrel.
Would that it were, Greg. Would that it were. Let me begin by saying you've got a pretty good impression. And considering his age, we need to get our John Kerry impressions in while we can. Remember, you're supposed to feel like you've been sucking the back of a public bus for about 3 hours. So it's got a very short-winded, very almost asthmatic and deeper lower register. So on the one hand, obviously very good for John Kerry. A lot of people might be, where was this, 4 years ago? Where was this when he was the special presidential envoy on climate change, and making the argument that, if Russia did less to reduce carbon emissions, people might be okay with what they were doing. The near genocidal destruction of civilians in Ukraine. But I guess dead Ukrainians emit fewer carbon emissions, so it all kind of balances out in John Kerry's mind. If John Kerry had actually said this in 2021, if he had said this in the preceding 4 years, I don't think it would have changed any minds. I don't think John Kerry is particularly influential. But I think there's something very strange about the fact that once the votes were counted on Election Day 2024, it became okay for Democrats to say, hey, yeah, if you don't have a secure border, you don't have a country. Hey, yeah, we really should have been doing something about that for the preceding 4 years. Hey, yeah, when we responded to Trump and his first term border and immigration policies, by deciding we were going to do the opposite of it, and we were going to halt all construction of a border wall, and we were going to minimize our enforcement, and we were going to demonize ICE. We were going to call for the abolishment of ICE. We were going to have an exponential explosion in gotaways and all that kind of stuff. If John Kerry had said this before Election Day 2024, Democrats would have hated him for it. Democrats would have lambasted him. If he had said this, Greg, the average Democrat would feel about John Kerry what you and I have felt about him since 2004. So there is something kind of fascinating that now it can be told. Now they could say, oh, by the way, I don't think there is something weirdly lemming-like, or you see a school of fish and they all swim in one direction, and then suddenly one fish turns and every other fish turns and goes in the same direction. And now these things that were like excommunication level blasphemy 6 months ago, now John Kerry is even quoting it like it's obvious conventional wisdom. Well, why did anybody say it then? Where were you, John? On Teresa's private jet, going to climate conferences.
Yes. He makes it very clear it's not technically his private jet. He just uses it all the time. So anyway, but he's saving the world. But he's right this time, so give him credit. I mean, this is This is a red letter day in the history of the 3 Martini Lunch. Let's see if the Democrats actually believe this heading into the midterms, or, whether they just think it's the right thing to say in certain circumstances to make themselves look less radical on the issue. And, well, we're going to find out just how radical some of them are on this issue in the next Martini. So in the meantime, this is an ad by BetterHelp, and workplace stress is now one of the top causes of declining mental health, with 61% of the global workforce experiencing higher than normal levels of stress. But you can't just stop working. You can come up with certain ideas to maybe de-stress a little bit, take a break, take a little walk, get some sunshine, go on vacation. But don't forget that therapy can help you navigate whatever challenges the workday or any other day might bring.
There are probably a lot of people listening to this who are thinking, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get through this day? How am I going to get through this week? What am I doing? You feel overwhelmed. Well, a therapist can really help. And with more than 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people all around the world. And it works with an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5. And that's not just based on a couple of people. That's based on more than 1.7 million client reviews. And it's convenient. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. And remember, you can switch therapists at any time.
As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/3ml. That's better, HELP.com/3ml. All right, on to our bad martini now, Jim. And our bad news is not the ICE raid yesterday in California. It's the mischaracterization of the ICE raid yesterday in California. Town Hall doing a good job aggregating on this and also reporting to some extent on this. First of all, they quote KTLA. Federal immigration agents, assisted by members of the National Guard, carried out raids at 2 Southern California cannabis farms, arresting dozens, including undocumented minors, in an operation that drew several hundred protesters and violent clashes with officers. The immigration sweeps, one at Glass House Farms in Camarillo and another about 35 miles up the coast at another Glass House facility in Carpinteria, unfolded simultaneously around 8:30 a.m. In Camarillo, video from Sky 5 showed a large federal law enforcement presence in the fields, with agents detaining workers as several hundred protesters began gathering. Now this is Town Hall's reporting. Pink-haired protesters are ramming Mexican flags into the tires of U.S. military vehicles and smashing the flagpoles against the windows amid an immigration raid in Camarillo. Then protesters clash with ICE as they conduct an immigration raid. It appears tear gas and smoke bombs were thrown into the crowd. Helicopters, police officers, ICE agents, and military vehicles are at the scene. And then most significantly, one of the protesters, we don't know if it's a protester or potentially a fleeing illegal, seemed to fire a gun at ICE agents. And now the FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction. Right on cue, California Governor Gavin Newsom gets it all wrong, saying kids running from tear gas, crying on the phone because their mother was just taken from the fields. Trump calls me new scum, but he's the real scum. But then the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Rodney Scott, tweets that and says, here's some breaking news. 10 juveniles were found at this marijuana facility, all illegal aliens, 8 of them unaccompanied. It's now under investigation for child labor violations. So, Jim, we saw all sorts of immediate narratives from Democrats, not only Newsom, but media reports getting this initially wrong. And ICE just seems to be their piñata, but ICE is actually the good guy here.
So, Greg, I must begin by pointing out the next thriller in the Dangerous Click series is proceeding very slowly. My apologies for everyone who is frustrated that I ended the last one on a cliffhanger and it's taken me forever to finish this next book. But if I had had a California farm that was employing unaccompanied minors from overseas, illegal immigrants, children, and exploiting them, and that they attempted to respond to this by demonizing ICE and saying that this was some sort of brutal police state action, and I called them Glass House Farms, everyone would just say, come on, Garrity, don't you think it's a little on the nose? Don't you think it's a heavy-handed metaphor that these progressives who are growing marijuana and exploiting child, they're called Glass House Farms? Really? Come on. The difference between truth and fiction is that fiction has to make sense, or the reader or the viewer gets very upset with you. Truth, hey, this is just, I believe right next door was, we're exploiting the kids' farms too. Maybe you want to look over there too. You know. So first of all, by the way, I'm going to make a slightly more serious point here, which is that the traditional structure of a newspaper, not all, but like for a long time, has been the front page, it gives you the news. And generally the back of the first section is where you get to the op-ed page. And so, first section is, here's what's happening. And then the back of the first section, which is still an important spot, but it's like, here's what we think about what's happening. Here's what conclusions we've drawn. Here's our analysis. Maybe on the news pages, you get analysis pieces, which come a little bit closer to an op-ed. But the idea is like, here's what happened, and then here's our reaction to what happened. If you consume your news through social media, Twitter, Facebook, if you're one of those people safely isolated on Blue Sky or something like that, very often if that's the first thing you check in the morning, you're starting with people's reaction to what happened. And in the case of Newsom's statement and a whole bunch of folks on the left who I saw on my feed this morning, they were reacting to what appears to be an entirely fictionalized circuit. I've heard people describe it as they're picking our food. No, do you eat marijuana? And some people will say, yes, Jim, brownies. I understand that to certain Californians, marijuana is indeed a basic staple of life, Snoop Dogg. And that obviously those folks, but like, no, really, like we cannot say that. So this is something that used to be illegal. I know it's very common now, but let's not act like, oh, these people are picking oranges or something like that. Then this is child labor. The kids are running, like the kids should be running to ICE because they're being exploited. They should not be running from ICE. I don't know, was there a mother involved or something? But the farm is not the good guys in this story. The farm is the bad guys. It doesn't matter if you don't like our immigration policies. In the end, they're exploiting kids. And oh, by the way, there's a class action lawsuit against it for abusing their workers. Now, not proven in court, but like if you are a person on the left, you're so primed to believe anything Gavin Newsom tells you. ICE is bad. The Trump administration is bad. People want to enforce immigration law is bad. Like, why? Like, doesn't it ever cross the mind of the people on the left that the current system gives unscrupulous employers a large group of people who they can exploit? And if you set up a system like that, do you think every employer is just going to be swell? This is a bad martini, not so much of what happened, but I suspect, there's an old saying that, a lie can get halfway around the world by the time the truth can, tie on its shoelaces. I hope people are going to get the real story on this. We're trying to do what we can on this podcast, but it does certainly seem like a perfect narrative of these mean ICE agents scaring the kids so they can't get back to their work picking marijuana for the exploitative employers. Just a crying tragedy there.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable that they'll continue with this narrative and trying to demonize ICE at every turn. Also, it's worth pointing out that the feds, ICE in this case, had a criminal judicial warrant signed by a judge to operate this operation. So it's not like they just happened to be driving by and swung into the fields. And so, and in one of the stories we thought about doing this week, but didn't quite get around to it, to just mention it now, CNN had this conglomeration of polls from ABC, CBS, New York Times, and the Marquette poll. Solid majorities of Americans want illegal immigrants deported. I think most people would want to start with, the hardened criminals, the violent criminals. But there's a sense that, if you're here illegally, you shouldn't be here and you need to go. And so the Democrats really are putting a lot of chips on trying to demonize ICE, and maybe they'll find a couple of cases where that people got roughed up a little bit more than they should have. But overall, the American people voted for this.
This, by the way, is a nomination. Think of this as your bonus 3.5 martini today. So over in the corner in the National Review today, I wrote about Dean Phillips is on CNN earlier this week, and he says Zoran Mamdani is a disaster for the party. I hope he doesn't win. He's going to make life so much harder for every other Democrat running in the 2026 midterms. Now, Greg, how long has it been since former Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips has warned his party about a major, significant, looming one, and no one chose to listen? You could take your metaphor. You could do it with Cassandra if you're into Greek mythology. I just kind of went with him as Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. That, your leftists were so concerned about whether they could nominate someone like this that it never crossed their mind. Should they nominate someone like this? And we'll see how things shake out from there. But let's run about the idea that immigration enforcement is evil and wrong. Well, if you want to make the midterms a referendum on that, let's go with it. Let's see how that goes. It hasn't worked out well for you. 2 out of the last 3 presidential elections, and I think we can argue 2020 was a pretty unique set of circumstances. So put all your chips on the table for this one, Democrats. Let's see how it goes.
I'm looking forward to that debate. If they want to fight this fight all over again, I don't think a whole lot has changed. If they're stressing out, maybe it's time for Caldera Lab. Get rid of those wrinkles and look a little bit younger as you make the argument anyway. But most skincare products just aren't made for us guys. And when they are, they're not great. They're complicated, they're packed with ingredients you've never heard of, or they just don't work. But Caldera Labs high-performance skincare is made just for men. It's simple, it's effective, and it's backed by science.
This is an award-winning serum with 27 botanicals and powerful antioxidants to protect your skin against daily stressors. The eye serum targets those dark circles and puffiness under your eyes and attacks it with peptides and adaptogens. The base layer is a lightweight moisturizer with plant stem cells and snow mushroom for deep hydration and a matte finish. It's formulated for men, created by expert cosmetic chemists who specialize in men's skincare.
In a consumer study, 100% saw smoother, healthier skin, and more than 90% noticed better hydration and a more youthful look. That's really good results. Skincare doesn't have to be complicated, but it should be good. So upgrade your routine with Caldera Lab and see the difference for yourself. Go to calderalab.com/3ml and use 3ml at checkout for 20% off your first order. Well, excellent foreshadowing there, Mr. Garrity, as you talked about Dean Phillips and his appraisal of Zohran Mamdani. He is, of course, now the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City. And you might have thought, because, in normal politics, if you lose a primary, you go away. Not so in New York City, because apparently before the election, Andrew Cuomo had qualified to be on an independent line. He's still technically running. He hasn't decided yet whether he's going to actually have a mounting campaign, but he's going to be on the ballot officially. So there's also a new poll out, though, showing that, this is from Slingshot Strategies, showing that Mamdani has a 10-point lead over Cuomo in that hypothetical election, assuming he runs an active campaign. Mamdani would get 35% of registered voters, followed by Cuomo with 25%. Here's kind of the surprise, though, Jim. Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee, at 14%. The incumbent New York City mayor, now officially an independent, former Democrat Eric Adams, at 11%, 13% still weren't sure. And given the crop of candidates, it's hard to blame them. But what do you make of the fact that the primary potentially didn't eliminate Cuomo and the numbers are what they are?
Well, I'll take this in reverse order here. The first thing is that since Mamdani won, there's been this perception like, he's clearly the favorite, but if everybody who doesn't like him kind of unifies behind one other option, then there's a chance we can beat him. So everybody's got to line up behind Eric Adams. Now, I can imagine if you're Curtis Sliwa, you're like, what am I, chopped liver? I've been kickboxing guys on the subways for decades now. Look, we all know the extraordinary difficulty of electing a Republican in New York City. Giuliani beating Dinkins was a very unique set of circumstances. Mike Bloomberg ran as a Republican because it was easier, not because he was particularly conservative. Pro-business, not a hard lefty in a couple of ways, but certainly on issues like gun control, certainly nothing resembling a traditional Republican. So okay, well, it's gonna be really hard to elect a Republican. We better throw our weight behind Adams, the incumbent, and who's running as an independent. The thing is, when you're the incumbent, people know what they're getting. People, and I've heard people arguing in defense of Eric Adams, the mayor brought to you by Turkish Airlines, incompetence over ideological extremism. In a way to say, New Yorkers, this is the incompetence you know. This is the incompetence you can trust. This is the incompetence you're used to. Doesn't that make you feel better and want to reelect this guy? And the answer, no. Mamdani's terrible, but if you really don't like the way that the way things are going in the city, then it's very tough. I think poll numbers like this, if I were Curtis Sliwa, I would why is everyone calling for me to drop out and endorse Adams if I'm ahead of this guy? Why doesn't he drop out? He's the guy. People know what they're getting with him, and they clearly don't want it. Nearly 9 out of 10 people are like, nope, no more of this stuff. So why not try me and my, dashing red beret and all that stuff? And the other things I know New York City has always had this system that seems strangely complicated and convoluted with many multiple party lines. Generally pretty minor. You're also, as a candidate, are allowed to run on several of them. So it'll be a headache for a Republican that sometimes you're not going to be on the Conservative Party or the Workers' Party. There's various other, far left, and generally they don't amount to much. But also there's this, in a lot of states you have a sore loser law that if you lose a primary, well, that's it, you're out. You don't get to run as an independent and louse things up for the guy who beat you in the primary in some sort of, vindictive agenda and, end up electing the other party. Cuomo lost the primary. What's he doing here? Why is he still here? Why, I feel like Ferris Bueller at the end of the movie. Go home. It's over. What the idea of Cuomo having run what proved to be a very bad and ineffective campaign from a very deeply corrupt and terrible human being. The idea of him sticking around and keeping his name on the ballot to ensure Mamdani's election feels like the sort of vindictive, thing that he would do in a circumstance like this. So I would like to see the non-Mamdani, non-communist, non-pro-intifada New Yorkers, which I still believe is at least 51%. By the way, it's worth noting, Mamdani, is not running away with this thing. 30-some% is not terrific. But in the end, you need, and remember, New York's got the weird ranked voting system and all that kind of stuff. So I'd like to see the non-Mamdani New York voters unite behind some option. But, if you're Adams, how do you justify staying in? The argument against Sliwa I laid out earlier. It's very tough to imagine that. And Cuomo, you lost. So why? Isn't there some other guy who's like in single digits, but like, hey, why not go with him?
How much worse could he be? Yeah. I mean, in a weird...
We do door number 4. Just put a New Yorker behind that. Yeah, maybe it's Don Mattingly. Maybe it's somebody you'll love. Darryl Strawberry, Patrick Ewing. Could be a great one. Or maybe not. Maybe it's Maybe it's Adam Gase. You're just going to have to roll the dice, New Yorkers. God, Adam Gase versus Zoran Mamdani. I have no idea who I'd vote for.
You'd be very glad to not be a New York City resident in that situation. Just to make things more convoluted, there is ranked choice in the primary, but not in the general.
Okay, thank you for correcting. So that makes total sense.
That makes total sense.
Only on alternating Tuesdays when the moon is rising in Sagittarius. That's...
And by the way, hats off to all the people who didn't find the communist Mamdani tweets before the primary, including the ones that, said, no, we really do want to defund the police, and things literally quoting Marx, like each according to their need, each according to their ability. I mean...
Yeah, those opposition researchers previously worked for the Ed Gillespie gubernatorial campaign. For those who don't live here in Virginia... It's our infamous former governor. Nobody bothered to look at his yearbook at any previous campaign until after he got into the governor's office.
The moonwalker in chief himself, Ralph Northam. But anyway, Jim, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.
TGIF. See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend. Join us again Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.